Himalayas. Myth and reality intertwined. Over 1,000 years ago, Buddhism enveloped these mountains and reached into every corner of people's lives. The rigors of the climate bound people and animals together in a fragile and delicate interdependence. In the endless cycle of death and rebirth, man and animal are inextricably entwined, and nowhere is that more true than in these mountains of the gods.
Major funding for nature is provided by the Park Foundation, dedicated to education and quality television. Major corporate support is made possible by Canon in our dedication to the preservation of nature and its never-ending beauty. In photographs, you can capture the wild and leave it as you found it. By Ford Motor Company, we turned large areas of this plant complex outside Mexico City into a natural refuge for waterfowl, amphibians, and desert flora. Ford Motor Company, better ideas driven by you. And by TIAA-CREF, meeting your personal investing needs with mutual funds, tuition savings plans, investments for retirement, insurance, and more. TIAA-CREF, ensuring the future for those who shape it. And by annual financial support from viewers like you.
In the beginning, there was a great sea. Legend tells that the god Vishnu swallowed up the sea and so released Mother Earth. But as Vishnu slept, a demon leapt upon the earth and ravished her with such force that her limbs were thrown up into the sky. And so were born the Himalayas. The truth is even stranger than the legend. A few million years ago, the rocks around me were a part of the bed of an ancient sea. India was then an island, and it drifted north and crashed into Asia's shore with such force that the collision crumpled the earth's crust and thrust up this great range of mountains. In both ancient legend and science, violence was the midwife of the mountains. But whatever their origins, the Himalayas today form a huge frozen wall stretching right across the northern borders of the subcontinent. Beyond that great barrier lies the high, cold desert of Ladakh. A ghost-like presence still haunts this realm of ice. Rare, elusive, shadowy, the snow leopard still has a few strongholds amid the high peaks. One of them is here, in Ladakh. In this harsh and savage moonscape, every crag seems crowned with monasteries. Over 1,000 years ago, Buddhism enveloped these mountains and reached into every corner of people's lives. Each winter, festivals draw people to the monasteries from all around. As Buddhism spread across Ladakh and the plains of the high Tibetan plateau, it embraced elements of far more ancient beliefs. In those older times, animals were living embodiments of a spirit world. The rigors of the climate bound people and animals together in a fragile and delicate interdependence, where man worshipped nature and respected the right to life. Today, those many layers of belief live on in the dances of monastic festivals. These are perhaps the equivalent of medieval mystery plays. History, legend and belief handed down across the generations. Dancers celebrate and tell the tales of the spread of Buddhism and those ancient links with the natural world. Deer, snow lion and bull, myth and reality intertwined. People share the mountains with majestic animals like these. Himalayan ibex. Ibex are sure-footed on the steepest of icy slopes. Their agility is essential to their survival. Just as ibex attains sanctuary on the cliffs, so all animals gain protection from the monasteries. To Buddhists, all life is linked in an endless cycle of death and rebirth. Every turn of the wheel releases the power of prayer. With this belief comes respect for all living things, so the surroundings of the monasteries are often a haven for wildlife. Safe from human persecution, chukor partridge shelter below the walls of the monastery. From the monasteries, the word reaches far into the mountains. Every gust of wind carries the message of 1,000 prayer flags. Mantras carved in stone are a constant reminder of the faith. In the high mountain villages of Ladakh, animals are vital to survival. In each home, there's a small herd of sheep and goats. Each morning, they are let out with the rest of the village stock. People take it in turn to drive this larger flock out to graze. The youngest and most vulnerable animals are kept at home. Wild birds share the life of the village. People use the flat roofs of their houses to store firewood and fodder, food and shelter for small birds like these robin accentors. And red-billed choughs. All are a constant reminder of the oneness of life. Ladakh's winters are frozen and relentless. There's not much snow, but temperatures can plummet to -30 or below. As the sparse grazing near the village is exhausted, sheep and goats are taken deeper into the heart of the mountains. Each year, the hunter of the high snows takes its toll of village livestock. But it's shy and kills mostly at night. If the herders are vigilant, it can be driven off. Over much of the Himalayas, the snow leopard's natural prey are animals like bharal or blue sheep. For them too, winter is a testing time. The scattered greenery of summer has long gone, and they must dig in the scree for the roots of herbs and grasses. By late November, their rutting season begins. The rams test one another's strength. Most will have spent the summer alone or in bachelor herds, but now it's a time of courtship, and the more dominant males join the female groups. Rams follow females in heat, sampling their scent constantly. Mating is frequent and brief. But not everyone is busy mating. Some animals are busy finding food and will even climb trees to get it. Far to the west of Ladakh, on Pakistan's border with Afghanistan, we find the magnificent Markhor. December is the time of the rut. Males battle for the female's favors. With his tongue, he tastes the female's scent. This is a rare and privileged glimpse. Markhor can't withstand extreme cold, so they have to winter on the lower slopes. That can bring them into conflict with people. Only a few hundred survive. High in the mountains, rivers seem locked in ice, but below the surface, water still flows. Warm springs ensure that this stream never freezes solid. A dipper waits to feed through a hole in the ice. The promise of water lures blue sheep down from the cliffs. In the desiccating cold of winter, the sheep get virtually no moisture from their food, so they seldom pass up a chance to quench their thirst. But the river is a dangerous place. Frozen stream beds are easy walking for a prowling snow leopard. The remnants of a blue sheep. The feast is over. The great grey cat has moved on. Winter lingers long in the mountains, but by May, the snow is beginning to melt. The Indus Valley is the heartland of Ladakh. The Indus rises far to the east near the sacred peak of Mount Kailash, center of the world in ancient cosmology. Even in the heart of winter, the fast-moving water never freezes over, so there's always open water for fish-eating birds like the merganser. The banks are lined with tall reeds and thickets of buckthorn. Buckthorn berries survive the winter, food for birds like redstarts and finches. Snowmelt waters a fleeting flush of green. This is when the blue sheep drop their lambs. The fresh grass will be vital nourishment for the few weeks that it lasts. The melting snows reveal the casualties of winter. Crows arrive first. A Himalayan griffin chooses its moment carefully. It's decided it's safe to join the crows. This is the signal for other vultures to follow. Himalayan griffins are the heaviest of the scavengers. They dominate the carcass. Others wait their turn on the sidelines, like this golden eagle. And a king vulture. In minutes, the griffins strip the carcass bare. It's now that the bone breaker arrives. The lamagir, they're also called bearded vultures. These are young birds. It will take them 3 years to assume adult plumage. These bearded vultures will exploit the remnants of the carcass. Remarkably, they carry the bones away and will drop them on the rocks, shattering them to expose the marrow within. Just as the melting snow reveals food for the scavengers and waters grass for the blue sheep, so it's the lifeblood of the villages below. The fields are transformed by the alchemy of water. There's almost no rain here. Crops are totally dependent on meltwater channeled from the snows above. Elaborate rules ensure that each field gets its fair share of water. These ancient techniques of water harvesting make the desert green. The staple crop here is barley. It's the only grain that will grow at this height. At well over 4,000 meters, Ladakh has some of the highest fields in the world. West of Ladakh lies the high plateau of the Deosai Plains. This natural oasis is marmot country. The young of the year emerge from their burrows to explore the world outside. This wrestling match will be good practice for adult life. At the height of summer, the grass is alive with insects. For everything that lives here, this is a time to breed, feed and fatten. But the bounty will be short-lived. For more than half the year, this high plateau is deep in snow. Yellow-headed wagtails come here to take advantage of the brief profusion of insects. But it's a race against time. They must fledge their young before the snows return. Even though the Deosai Plains can be under snow for as much as 9 months in some years, the small lakes and rivers support frogs. At over 14,000 feet above sea level, these must be among the highest dwelling amphibians in the world. And this high elevation is also a hunting ground for predators. Marmots have many natural enemies. Not just snow leopards and birds of prey, but even bears. They can dig marmots from their burrows. But for now, the bears have easier ways of fattening up after the winter's hibernation. The Deosai Plains are one of the last strongholds of the Himalayan brown bear. This mother bear is wary of a male foraging nearby. Apart from people, the only thing likely to threaten her cub is another bear. Ladakh may be a desert, but it has a few scattered lakes and marshes. Bar-headed geese overwinter on the wetlands of the Ganges floodplain. Each spring, they make an incredible journey right across the Himalayas to reach their breeding grounds. And the very rare black-necked crane. Just a few nest here. These shallow lakes warm quickly, yielding plenty of insects for newly hatched goslings. They must grow fast to escape the chill of the winter to come. Wild ass gather on the grasslands around the lakes. By August, the mares have dropped their foals, and almost at once they come on heat. Stallions taste the air, and the hills echo to the thundering hooves of ardent chases. Wild ass span the climatic extremes of the subcontinent, from 50 degrees in the hot desert of the Rann of Kutch to -40 here in the cold desert of Ladakh. A stallion can be given the runaround all day. As the shadows lengthen into evening, the mare finally yields. Ladakh lies in the rain shadow north of the great Himalayan divide. On the southern side of the mountains, the sun rises on a very different land. In the shadow of the sacred peak of Shivling, a sadhu meditates by the source of the holy river Ganges. Gaumukh, the cow's mouth. From the snout of the Gangotri glacier, India's most sacred river starts its long journey to the sea. For Hindus, the Ganges' icy beginnings are among the holiest places in the Himalayas. These sacred waters cleanse the soul and wash away the sins. From all over India, pilgrims flock to shrines and temples among the high snows. For them, these sublime peaks are truly the mountains of the gods. Up here, where the river is young, its banks are cold, stony and austere. But as it cascades down towards the foothills, it enters a world vibrant with life and colour. The marble rocks around these falls have been polished by this glacier for centuries. It once reached many miles further down the valley than it does today. The Ganges is an ancient river, carving an ever-deepening gorge through the foothills. The surrounding mountains are thickly forested. What makes this area so different from the dry lands beyond the snows? I'm at 3,000 meters in the great Himalayan forests of northern India. Some of the peaks behind me are enveloped by clouds and rise above 7,000 meters. This great Himalayan barrier intercepts the moisture-laden winds of the monsoon, forcing them upwards to release their burden of rain and snow, creating a carpet of lush vegetation. Grey langurs feast on the young shoots of Indian horse chestnut. These are the same langurs that we find over much of India, but more thickly furred to withstand the cold of the mountains. In winter, these forests are deep in snow, but in spring they burst into a new growth, a banquet of opportunity for leaf eaters like langurs. As you climb up the mountains, the forest changes. Oak and chestnut give way to spruce and fir, and on the edge of the alpine meadows, to birch. One group of plants extends over that whole range of altitudes, the rhododendrons. In the forest, there are massive trees. Higher up, there are large bushes, and higher still, dwarf shrubs clinging to the ground. From March through into May, a rainbow wave of colors sweep up the mountains. These superb rhododendron forests are home to musk deer, one of the rarest of all Himalayan animals. The males, distinguished by the remarkable tusk-like teeth, are the source of the strong-smelling musk used in perfumes. The musk gland, located near the navel, is worth more than its weight in gold, and this fact has pushed the musk deer to the brink of extinction. The musk deer feed on lichen, moss, ferns and leaves. They communicate through scent marking. In fact, the scent of the male musk influences the estrus cycle in females. They share the rhododendron forest with blood pheasants. Their name comes from the male's sharp crimson markings, a color matched by few other birds. Where the forest gives way to alpine meadow, a yellow-throated marten rubs shoulders with Himalayan tar. Each level has its own animals. Tar live on the steep grassy slopes just above the forest. Birds can bridge these different worlds, soaring at will from cliff to meadow to forest. With their 3-meter wingspan, lammergeiers are masters of the air. They nest early in the year, taking advantage of the casualties of winter. By rhododendron time, the young are well grown, almost ready to join their parents in the air. Lammergeiers nest right across the Himalayas wherever there is carrion to scavenge. You can find them from the dry deserts of Ladakh all the way to India's eastern borders. In the forested foothills of Bhutan, there's a very special monkey, the golden langur. It's related to the grey langur we saw earlier, but it's found only here, isolated between two rivers that carve their way down from the Himalayan snows. It became known to science only in 1953. From Bhutan, we soar with the lammergeier to the furthest end of the mountains. I'm taking you to a hidden world that very few have seen. When India drifted across the ancient Tethys Sea and crashed into Asia, the initial impact was in the east, where Burma, China and India meet. This is where the mountains were born. Arunachal Pradesh, the land of the rising sun. Shrouded in mist, the green mountains of Arunachal are very special. There's a richer variety in these forests than anywhere else in the Himalayas. The Great Collision created an oriental connection. This is the gateway through which plants and animals passed. Some spread far across the subcontinent, others got little further than this, and their descendants are still here today. Birds like forktails are just one legacy of that eastern impact. They live along forest streams throughout Southeast Asia. This land crab could be another eastern colonist, an unlikely creature to find in a Himalayan forest. And the most flamboyant orientals, the pheasants. The red panda. Its strongholds are in the mountains of southwest China, but it has spread west along the Himalayas as far as central Nepal. The forests on the southern face of the Himalayas have been a corridor for creatures like this. Most of the time, red pandas are solitary. As they move through the forest, they mark their trails with scent from a gland in their posterior. This marks out their territory, and perhaps it helps them find one another in the mating season. They spend most of their time in the trees. They live in dense forests from 1,500 meters upwards, and they're mainly nocturnal. We are lucky to see one during the day. Like the giant panda, they eat bamboo shoots, but they take a lot else besides: fruit, insects, even birds' eggs. Rufous-necked hornbills and Malayan giant squirrels are eastern immigrants too. And so is this. The Hulock gibbon is India's only ape. Gibbons come from the tropical rainforests of Southeast Asia, but here on our borders with Burma, they've reached the foothills of the Himalayas. The females are brown, the males black. They live in family parties, a pair of adults with up to 3 young of different ages. From snow leopards to gibbons, what an amazing contrast. We started our journey in a high, frozen wasteland, and here we are virtually in a tropical rainforest. And yet, we are still in the Himalayas. The mountains of Arunachal Pradesh receive the full force of the monsoon. It's the massive barrier of the Himalayas that creates the Indian monsoon. Here, 10 meters of rain can fall in just a few months. This life-giving water determines the survival of more than 1 billion people. The source of hundreds of rivers that flow across the subcontinent are in the high glaciers, cradled by a world covered in snow. Many believe that all life started in this abode of the gods. Our journey has taken us over 2,500 kilometers, from one end of the Himalayas to the other. But I still have one final visit to make. I'm looking for a tiger. I'm way up in the Himalayas at Nama Buddha, and this for me is a pilgrimage of a lifetime. It symbolizes how Buddhism embraced nature, and this is where Lord Buddha is said to have given his life to a starving tigress and her cubs. Here in a shrine in the mountains of Nepal, a carved stone of great antiquity shows how the Buddha pierced his hand and gave his own blood so that the tigress and her cubs could live. That so much else survives owes much to the pervading influence of religious belief. In the endless cycle of death and rebirth, man and animal are inextricably entwined, and nowhere is that more true than in these mountains of the gods. This is the land of a phantom, the phantom of the snows. For some, it's a bridge between heaven and earth, a symbol of freedom. Up here, there is a deep silence, empty of all but the wind. Another world beyond the reach of man.
To learn more about what you've seen on this nature program, visit PBS online at www.pbs.org.
In the next program, I'll be taking you to the lush monsoon forests of the Indian subcontinent, to the high hills of the Western Ghats, to India's northeast, and to Sri Lanka.
Land of the Tiger is available on home video cassette for $19.95 or $89.95 for the 6-part series. To order, call 1-800-336-1917 or write to the address on your screen. Please specify episode title. Major funding for nature is provided by the Park Foundation, dedicated to education and quality television. Major corporate support is made possible by Canon in our dedication to the preservation of nature and its never-ending beauty. In photographs, you can capture the wild and leave it as you found it. By Ford Motor Company, our new vehicles are made with more than 2 million tons of recycled metals, enough to build 250 Eiffel Towers a year. Ford Motor Company, better ideas driven by you. And by TIAA-CREF, meeting your personal investing needs with mutual funds, tuition savings plans, investments for retirement, insurance, and more. TIAA-CREF, ensuring the future for those who shape it. And by annual financial support from viewers like you.